Hey everyone, today we are crazy fortunate to get 20 free minutes of counseling with Floyd, licensed marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor. And I'm kidding on the free counseling part. Ann is on staff at Hope Church, Memphis. She has 2 children and earned her master's degree in counseling from Harding School of Theology. In this episode, we talk all things mental health, some of the stigmas associated with it, and how we can navigate this stress, anxiety, and worry-inducing season. Ann gets practical, Ann gets personal, and Ann preaches a little, and I kind of like that. All right, let's meet Ann Floyd in the green chair. Thank you so much for being here with us in the green chair. I'm really excited about this one. I mean, I'm excited about all of them, but I'm really excited about this one because I'm a huge fan of yours, number one. Number two, you are the first female in the green chair.
Yay!
Congratulations.
Trailblazer.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I want to just really start with your story. I want to start with, how did you get into counseling? What kind of drove you there?
So it was, if it were like mapped out on a map, it would look like a lot of fits and starts. So my undergraduate degree is in communications. And I wish I could say that I had a plan when I graduated from college. I did not. I wish I could say I had a plan when I actually chose the major. I did not. But I always thought I was a good writer, and so that kind of seemed hand in hand. And it really was God ordering. I can look back now and see how He ordered my steps. And so I remember my very first job in corporate America, and I had got an internship that turned into a position, and I was working in communications, so I was kind of doing what I trained to do, and something just didn't fit, something didn't feel right. And I had an uncle that gave me a book, What Color's Your Parachute? And it kind of walks through like finding out your passions and your goals and things like that. And so what came up was counseling and teaching. And so as I started to research counseling, I was like, I'd have to go back to school for that. Yeah, no thanks. So I'll just do this. And so it was one of those things I feel like God had planted the seed. It was in the back of my mind. And then life happens as it does. And so I had a family member who had some mental health struggles. And I remember just feeling and wishing and longing to be more equipped than I was to help them navigate that season, and just feeling like just kind of a bystander as opposed to an active participant. And so again, just I think God using that to say that will be coming.
Yeah.
There'll be an opportunity there. And so it really took me, I continued to work in corporate communications for 15 years and was living and working in Chicago, and got a job opportunity to move to Memphis, and the employer was going to move me, and they had me at Pack Me Up. So I was like, I don't have to pack myself? Okay, they'll have movers. So I moved here and worked there for a couple of years, and some things happened where it became clear that was going to come to an end. And I really feel like God said, this is now the time. And so the door opened up, and the season was then to go back to school. So at that point I had researched and looked at counseling programs here. So it's again kind of like I was plodding through, not quite knowing how we would make the jump from working to going back to school, and having a lot of trepidation about being a full-time student or just working and being a student at the same time. But it really was the season of life that I was in, and it was the right time to do it. So then I went to Harding School of Theology, and because it was really important for me to marry the counseling piece with the spiritual piece. Again, not quite knowing. I didn't know at the time I'd be working in a church. That wasn't even necessarily part of my plan. It was God's plan. But just knowing in terms of counseling, feeling like it was rooted and connected to who I was as a person. Me not wanting to make good money in corporate America, but that was not fulfilling and satisfying, and realizing, and now knowing that I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, knowing as a helper that part of my identity, part of my value is about doing something that I feel like brings value and helps other people's lives to be better.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a circuitous route. But that's how really kind of counseling found me.
Yeah, I like that. I do feel like sometimes we like to pretend like life is just like this straight and narrow path, and you make a decision.
Never
Or like
linear.
I heard somebody once say, we think sometimes like climbing a ladder, right? You just go straight. It's so clean and easy.
Nah.
But she actually compared it to a jungle gym.
Oh yeah.
Like you jump over here and then you crawl up over here and then you
Yeah.
jump over here. So I
went
really,
down the slide a few times.
Yes, I like that.
Of life before
really like
getting
that.
there. Yeah.
Okay, so I love that you're kind of touching on this idea of marrying the spiritual, right, with your counseling. Because I actually had a conversation with a coworker. I was telling you about this. I had a conversation with a coworker, and she's like, back in my era, like there was a negative stigma with mental health. There was a negative stigma with going to counseling, and particularly with the faith community. And so, do you still see that? Are you seeing that? Like, kind of.
I do. I would say it probably isn't what it was 20 years ago or 15 years ago. I think part of what is removing or lightening the stigma is more spiritual leaders, pastors being very transparent about their own mental health struggles, advocating for counseling, advocating for medication, advocating for some of those things that have been treated as taboo and seen as running counter to faith. And so what I hear a lot of from people is clients sometimes they're struggling with seeing it as a failure of faith in coming to see a counselor.
Wow.
That if my faith was stronger, if I was obedient, if I was living the life that I should, then I probably wouldn't have these struggles. And the reality is we live in a broken world and there is brokenness. Like we can't get away from that. And the brokenness looks different for different people. And so it's just a lot of times dismantling some of this bad theology or just erroneous belief systems that create barriers for people getting the help that they need. Some people have been told, they have sought out, a pastor, they've sought out someone that was well-meaning but maybe didn't have the counseling training, and so they're struggling with depression or anxiety, and they're given a scripture about, you're not supposed to be anxious for anything.
Yeah.
And that doesn't negate that, but I don't really see it as an either or. I see it as a both and. I think that spirituality, because we're spiritual beings as well as physical and emotional beings, that's an important piece of it. I think oftentimes that being emotionally out of balance can signal something spiritually being out of balance, but it doesn't have to necessarily mean that. And so a lot of times people are coming when they're struggling with it, like an either or, like it either has to be I'm rooted in faith and I'm faithful, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, or I'm really struggling and that's why I'm having these emotional or mental health issues. It's more like helping them understand how to marry the two and to let go of a lot of that self-condemnation and judgment that they're taking on that they may have gotten from other circles that I just don't believe is the way that God wants. That's not the burden that He wants us to be carrying.
Yeah. And I you and I were just talking about how there's even a lot of misconceptions about like when to go to counseling.
Right.
So I'd love for you to share a little bit about.
So a lot of times, have people say, "Oh, things aren't that bad."
Yes. Yeah.
And I tell people I really see counseling as maintenance. I really see a counseling session can be like a tune-up.
Yeah.
When you take your car in, you don't have to wait till you hear the clunk, 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 or the light coming on the dash. Those can be signals.
Yes.
However, a lot of times, there's a marriage researcher by the name of John Gottman that talks about for couples that a lot of times they will wait 6 years after a problem surfaces before they obtain marriage counseling. So you think about all that can happen and transpire.
6 years.
6 years.
That's a long time.
That's a really long time. And a lot of times, with couples, one person or both people have started to check out.
Yep.
And so oftentimes it can feel too late, be too late for them. But I think that a lot of times people, because there is still a bit of a stigma about getting help. I've had people say, I should be able to figure this out on my own. I should be able to do this. I shouldn't have to talk to a complete stranger about these issues. And I think, particularly Americans, there's a value of self-reliance, which runs counter to a God-reliance or us being interdependent. And I think that, I said in the same way that we will contact a doctor sometimes, but sometimes people, they're like, I'm not going to go to a doctor until I'm dying. So we kind of treat counseling in the same way. And I don't think that it has to be that way. And I'm certainly not saying if the bottom has fallen out and the light's on the dashboard of your relationships or in your life, don't call me. But it can be doing a lot more work, and the urgency is greater when, you know, somebody is saying, I can't wait a week. Do you have anything this week? And it makes it harder because it's really trying to swim upstream at that point, as opposed to maybe catching things as they started to get off course a little bit and being able to redirect it, as opposed to we got a lot of work. We got a lot of work to do to try to just get to a place of stability.
I'll sit down with a couple for premarital counseling, and the first thing I say is find a counselor. You know, like find a counselor for later, because every year we'll go to the doctor, we'll get a checkup, we'll do those things. If you can find yourself a counselor that can walk you through that long term, they've got the tools for that. And speaking of tools, we need tools. This is like crazy season. I mean, we've got worry, we've got stress, we've got like a pandemic. I mean, we've got all kinds of civil unrest. I mean, we've got tons of stuff happening. What are you seeing right now?
So I'm seeing all of that. It's really, you know, anxiety is the predominant, but anxiety and depression, you know, I tell clients they're like cousins, first cousins, because a lot of times they can run in parallel, and it's kind of like who's taking the lead today. A lot of isolation and loneliness and hopelessness and helplessness, a lot of strain in relationships, be it with spouses, children. There's just like a significant number of stressors. And for people that already had a level of stress, and we don't have a level of stress, but one of the things that seems to be happening right now is all of that is amplified. Because a lot of the things that we have used as distractions or outlets simply are not available to us. And so a lot of the social piece, which I think is really important, we don't have right now. Just the nature of, I was telling somebody yesterday, just the nature of couples where one or both are leaving the house to work, now being in the house together. You know, I can be the most patient person when I don't have to exercise patience with anybody else.
Like all day.
All day.
Like all day.
Every day. There's no like, you know, you don't clock out.
Monday to Monday. Like there's no Monday to Friday.
It's Groundhog Day. Every day seems like the same. And so this is a very anxiety-inducing time. You know, the pandemic piled on everything else, just ups the ante. And so for people who might have been able to manage the stressors that just life is bringing in whatever arena, being now in this time of isolation, being in this time of limited outlets has really just kind of blown everything else out of the water. And so I'm seeing the needs greater, the needs more urgent. Grief and loss being a part of it. So people losing loved ones, whether it's to COVID or just due to various ways of loss of life, but then there's a lot of other losses attached to this time too. So family members that may be across the airways that they've not seen each other, people giving birth and it not being the experiences, the milestone graduations and weddings and events that are either canceled, rescheduled, pared down. And so people's pictures of what these times would look like, what these experiences would look like, not happening, and having to deal with the reality of that and not being able to do anything about it. I think, again, in America, we like to feel like we're in control. And I feel like in this time has really seems to be like a shaking of all the things that we thought were necessary, all the things that we thought were important, and really a stripping away of really getting back to the basics in a way that I don't know we would have chosen to do had we not been forced
I don't
to
think
do
so.
it. You know, and so I'm not going to say I'm grateful for the pandemic, but I think there's things if we're willing to learn and be open and look for and listen for, that there's things we can take from this time that I think God is trying to tell us and teach us.
Okay, so you know, this is really interesting. I wasn't planning on telling this, and apparently I'm just going to tell it in front of everybody now. But, you know, anxiety has been a thing for me. You know, I think it comes out in the perfectionist type mentalities and the planner. You and I were talking, when we were having a conversation about this, you're like, man, it's the worst for the planners, because what can we plan? like zero.
Nothing.
I can plan nothing.
Maybe a meal.
Yeah, maybe. My lunch meal today was not so good.
Right.
But like, I just think, I say that to say, like, you know, I think we kind of are like going and going and going, and we get in the middle of it and we don't realize how, like, I mean, I was actually having a conversation with my doctor and I was like, I just feel way more anxious than I've ever felt in my entire life. And she's like, well, this is a pandemic. And we don't realize it, right? Like, I think we're living it and we're doing it day in, day out. We're like, why am I more anxious than normal?
Right.
Why am I more worried? Why am I just so, like, burdened
On edge,
and on edge? And I think sometimes even just hearing you normalize it, I think is really refreshing.
Yeah.
But then also even just hearing my doctor be like, yeah, this is like, this is a very anxious time.
Right.
And I was like, oh, like when you put it like that.
And I do spend a lot of time normalizing that, like, we have, I think, very unrealistic, or can have unrealistic expectations. You know, I tell clients all the time, nobody is killing the pandemic game, okay? Like, nobody is just really rocking it and saying, you know, I said, and if they're acting like they're just better at faking it than maybe everybody else is.
Yeah.
But this is not a space and place that anybody else has been in, unless you're in your hundreds.
Yeah.
So my grandmother, who would be 102 now, her father died of the yellow fever back in 1918 when she was born, 9 months after she was born. So that was the last global pandemic. And so that, just in that framework, I'm like, we don't know what this looks like. We don't have a blueprint for this. We are literally taking it moment by moment. It's not even day by day sometimes. It's moment by moment. And that's a very uncomfortable feeling, which is where the faith piece kicks in. Because we really, in knowing God, He knows what's on the other side of this, so we don't have to. But in our humanity, we want to know what's on the side. So the planner is like, well, just give me a nugget. Just let me, can I schedule something in April? Can I not? Like, what am I supposed to do? But really normalizing people's experience for them, because I think that kind of, the pandemic piece gets boxed out.
Yes.
The civil unrest gets boxed out. But those are all factors that are impacting how we feel, how we see the world, how we move about. You know, as a Black woman, you know, when the incident with George Floyd happened, I've not been able to bring myself to watch the video because as a mom hearing I call for his mother, but also I don't need another image. I have enough images emblazoned. So to operate as if that doesn't impact a person just isn't realistic. We take all of that and then we're still trying to work and still trying to parent and still trying to be partners and friends and you know, siblings and children and all of that. And that's a lot. And so a lot of what I spend time telling clients is do what you can do. And, you know, adjust your expectations of what's realistic right now on your plate. It's really looking at, for a lot of my clients, kind of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're not at self-actualization right now. We're at the basic, like, are you sleeping? And I'll ask, like, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? Are you getting exercise? Those are those things are huge, particularly sleep is huge in terms of someone's mood and how they're feeling and how they're able to, do they have enough margin to be able to look at things clearly? Or, you know, if particularly for people who struggle with anxiety, a lot of times insomnia, whether getting to sleep or waking up and the thoughts, because their body's resting, it's in some ways, but the brain is still going. And so, you know, I'm doing a lot of things around relaxation, but also mindfulness in terms of being present in the moment. Anxiety is very future focused. Depression is focused in the past. Both of those things keep us from being rooted in the present, in the here and now.
Wow, that's good.
And so people really looking at, okay, what do I need to do today? Like, as people start, particularly the planners, to start the laundry list of things, and I'm one of them, but the laundry list of things, but what has to happen today? What's necessary today? Because we can be 6 months from now, knowing that we don't control that, and that stirs all that stuff up again. So really trying to bring yourself or redirect yourself, again, non-judgmentally, back to what's happening in the moment, what's happening in the present moment. Is there anything I can do about it? If not, then it has to be set to the side, put it in the mailbox, write it on a piece of paper, visualize whatever you need to do to acknowledge I don't need to pick this up, particularly because I can't do anything about it anyway.
Yeah, and you just kind of dove in on like tools and like I mean, do you have any more like practical advice for just like those of us with worry, anxiety, I mean, there's all of these different pieces. Loneliness too is another one. When you and I were talking, I mean, and that's kind of this like kind of undercurrent, I feel like, of this conversation is one day at a time. And I even like, you've kind of changed that too. You're saying one moment.
One moment at a time.
Yeah, I mean, what any other, I like kind of ending on this like super practical note of like, how to give us some things we can actually do.
So I like, one of the things is maintaining community to the degree that you can. So again, there's this thought that I should be able to handle everything on my own. And so it's looking at what is your support network looking like? Do I need to reach out? And, you know, some people may have unhealthy relationships with their family of origins. And so that may not be a realistic thing for them to look to their family, but who is my support? What does my support look like? And how do I instill and enlist their help for the support? Part of it is asking for the help, building community for parents who are, you know, homeschooling or working from home and kids are going to school virtually. How do you build a community? Because nobody can do it on their own, whether it's extended family, neighbors, it's building those communities. And part of it is asking for help. You know, I talked about just kind of the basic kind of life skills, meeting those basic needs. I think another piece is being very vigilant, I think cautious about what you take in. So what are you listening to? What are you watching? What's the content of your conversations? It's not a bad thing to not be on social media from time to time.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's not a bad thing to not watch the news. Every night.
We just need to breathe.
It's, you know, there's ways to stay informed. I've said in kind of different forums that I've done, I like to read my news as opposed to watch it. So I can kind of manage it that way. But as important as our physical diet is in terms of what we're eating, what am I taking in mentally, emotionally, spiritually that can also impact how I'm feeling? Because I think part of that, if you watch the news, it makes complete sense that you walk away feeling hopeless. Because it all sounds hopeless. You know, I see some networks trying to do some kind of like good neighbor stories, but that's wedged in between 25 other minutes of despair. Taking it a moment at a time, and really looking at the fact that we don't really have as much control about things as we think.
Ooh, that's so hard though.
We do.
Yeah, that's good though. That's really, really good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I just feel like I want to sit here and just continue having this conversation. I literally am thinking of like 5 more questions that I didn't even talk to you about that I just want to sit here and have a conversation around. But let's not do that.
But I can come back.
No, you can come back. Yeah, we'll have a part 2. Part 2 with Ann. I would love that. Thank you so much for being with us today in the green chair. We so appreciate you. And that is a wrap for our green chair conversation with Ann Floyd. Don't forget, the conversation doesn't have to stop here. If you want to connect further, email us at greenchair@hopechurchmemphis.com. This way we can keep you up to date with insider information, reflection questions if you desire, and we will be offering some additional resources on how you can take this conversation beyond the chair. Love you guys. See you next week.